Welcome back. This is The Weekend Report. I'm Masachaba Mposwa. Major contemporary artists from Southern Africa will have their works showcased in New Orleans in the United States of America. Curated by Laurie Ann Farrell under the theme, "If You Look Hard Enough, You Can See Our Future." The exhibition features the works of Robert Hodgins, William Kentridge, Vivian Collar, and Zanele Moholi, to name a few. We're now joined by one of those artists, Mbongeni Buthelezi, to tell us more about what this feature means and about his recycled plastic artwork. Good morning, Mbongeni. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika.
Good morning, Masachaba. Thank you for inviting me.
Firstly, let's talk about your style of creating art. You use recycled plastic, and it's not just about the art, it's actually, in fact, a statement, activism. Tell us a bit more about how you got into using plastic as a part of your artwork.
Thank you, Masachaba. Look, I mean, I've been doing this for the last, 33, 34 years now. Because I started, working with plastics in 1991, to be precise. The whole idea when I started was, on my part, it was lack of resources because I had absolutely no money, to actually pursue my dream of becoming an artist. And at the time when I was doing that, I didn't know that I was making this very important statement, with regards to trying to reduce waste, particularly plastics, in the environment. I only discovered that, around 23 years ago, that I'm really doing a very, very, important work with regards to recycling and, trying to sort out, the challenge that the world is facing today with regards to plastics.
That's very interesting. And what's even more interesting is that yesterday was Human Rights Day. And I've seen somewhere that you mentioned that when you were still learning how to do art a long time ago, you say, you didn't have access to a lot. There were no classes, there was no formal education around the arts. How have you seen the space evolve over the years?
Look, if I were to tell you exactly where I'm coming from, Masachaba, we can spend the entire day. Because it's been a long journey, for me. And if I were to start exactly where it all started, I was a student at Funda Center in Soweto. That's where my artistic career started. And I mean, you can imagine, I was traveling all the way from Watemba in Springs, to Soweto daily, changing trains and all of that. And remember, in the 80s, at the time when I was doing that, the political situation in the country was very much unstable, very much unsafe for a young man like myself, But I persisted because at the end of the day, I wanted to achieve something. I wanted to become what I am today, if I were to put it that way, to make a contribution in the world, as I'm doing now.
And would you say today that artists such as yourself receive support, at least from our government?
To be honest, I don't think it's enough. It will never be enough because, for example, the exhibition that I'm going to, that I'm part of, that is now happening in New Orleans. In my view, I think this is something that should be happening almost every year in South Africa, where we ship, some of our talent to the world out there. But, unfortunately, it's not something that is happening simply because, as artists, we are sort of there, we don't really get enough support from our department, if I were to put it that way, even though, individual artists, some individual artists are actually getting maybe the support, but not everyone, and I think, our department can sort of do a bit more. And somehow, I think in doing that, there must be some kind of collaboration, between the Department of Education and the Department of Arts and Culture, because with those two departments together, we can sort of, as artists, go back to schools, and try and make kids understand that art is also very, very important, as part of our lives, It's educational partly, and it also serves, part of our cultural, well-being, as a nation. So it's very, very important, and I don't think really we're getting enough support. It should be more.
The title of the upcoming, or rather the exhibition in New Orleans is If You Look Hard Enough, You Can See Our Future. What is your interpretation of this title?
If you look hard enough at what South Africa can do, you can see our future. This is what I actually interpret this theme. It's a very, very important exhibition because, these artworks that are shown in this museum, they were selected from 27,000 artists, artworks, that are in the collection of Nandos, which is actually great. And I mean, more than 20 artists are part of this exhibition. And I think it means a lot. It is somehow one of the ways of trying to sell, South African culture, to market us in the outside world. And it's even more important, for this particular exhibition because it happens for the first time in an educational institution, the Newzroom Museum, which is based in a museum in New Orleans. Luckily, I was part of the previous tour of the exhibition in Atlanta, where it really received a huge support, from the locals, from the artists, from people who are generally interested to know more about South Africa as a country and its culture, for that matter.
What can people expect from your exhibition?
A lot. It's a contemporary South African art collection that really varies from famous South African artists and, young up-and-coming artists. I mean, if one were to mention a few, I mean, your Sam Tlenetwa is part of this exhibition, William Kentridge is part of this exhibition, Zanele Moholi, William Collar, and of course myself, I'm also part of this exhibition. And I think there is a lot that people can learn or sort of take away from this exhibition because it talks about hope, it talks about our culture as South Africans, which is very important because not many people are aware of what South Africa is all about. And I think with this exhibition, I'm sure it will open a small window, to some people sort of understand and follow what South Africa is and what it's all about, actually.
You also have another exhibition coming up in the United States. Would you care to tell us a bit more about that as well?
Oh, yes. I'm actually flying out this evening to Maryland in the United States, where I'm invited by Resource Recycling. Resource Recycling is a company that actually organizes big conferences in the United States and sort of maybe partly in Europe as well, where they deal specifically with plastic recycling. And this conference starts on Monday, and for me as an artist to be invited, to participate in this exhibition is such a huge honor. I'm really privileged because it's the plastic recycling conference where it attracts people mainly who recycle plastics. And it's exactly what my art is all about. And, and I'm very, very excited because for the first time, sort of, in my whole artistic career, I am going to be in contact, with people who are directly, trying to, work with what concerns me as an individual or as an artist. So it's exciting. I'm looking forward to it. And it will be a very nice, interesting week for me, this coming week.
Mbongeni, lastly, in closing, what message do you have for young up-and-coming artists?
Young artists must realize that art is not always about how much money you have in your pocket. Art is about how you bring ideas together to make sense out of it. When I started to experiment with plastics in 1991, I didn't know that I'll be the first artist in the world to do the type of work that I do. And I didn't know that, I'll be doing so much contribution, to the world with regards to recycling and, collecting plastic in the landfill as it is today. So young artists must never be scared to experiment, to sort of work hard and focus. And they must actually not work because someone is watching, because that is very dangerous. They must work hard even though, no one is watching them. But eventually they will see the light, one day. As it is happening today with me. I have achieved what I never thought I would ever achieve with my art. Because I worked so hard, I focused, I dedicated myself, and I also wanted to make the difference. And I think young artists must also remember that as artists, we must also try and see the challenges of the world today. You know, if they can focus on what the world is the challenges that the world is facing, and be able to focus on that instead of just making art as a hobby, which is not a problem. But I think, you know, art is something that is supposed also to solve some of the challenges that the world is facing, you know, which is what I'm trying to do with my art.